How can two individuals with massive egos work together? I'm talking about Tony Stark and Peter Parker here. Welcome to the Complete Story Series, where I take trade paperbacks and single issues, and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then I read it dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panel text and images are to prevent copyright issues, and all art is owned by its respective companies. This takes place after our last all-new, all-different Spider-Man story, which is with him taking down the Zodiac Gang. This is the storyline following that one. It continues the plot line. This is issues 12 to 15. Peter Parker gets ready to go on stage to promote his Uncle Ben Foundation. But while Harry assists him with his tie, Harry notices that there is someone else here, Mary Jane. Peter asks her what she's doing, and she tells him that she's making an entrance. But actually, she's here to work with her new boss. Peter begins to ask what happened to her old job, and then he stops and asks, wait, new boss? Before Mary Jane can answer though, Tony Stark steps in. Peter says, hello Tony, and then he realizes that this is her new boss. Tony asks Peter if he and Mary Jane know each other, and Peter tells him, yeah, we all lived together in the Avengers Tower, Tony, don't you remember? You helped me build the Iron Spider suit for Spider-Man? Nope, Tony tells him. Tony then goes on to state that being Tony Stark, you meet so many people. It's hard to keep track of them all. And with that, Peter has to start getting ready to promote the Uncle Ben Foundation. So Tony and Mary Jane head off to their seats. But before sitting, they meet Augustus Roman, the CEO of Empire Unlimited. Mary Jane asks if they've met before, but Augustus tells her, certainly not, I would remember. A short while later, Peter gets on stage, but before he can go into his speech, claws begin to appear behind him, and through the wall, Ghost, the corporate espionage supervillain, jumps out telling everyone that he sees what everyone is doing. Everyone here has been feeding off the poor and the disenfranchised, but none of them are worse than Augustus Roman. Ghost then begins to charge his attack, and he blasts Augustus, knocking him down. Peter Parker and Tony Stark both suit up, and they swoop in to stop Ghost, but when the two of them jump out of nowhere and they begin attacking, both Peter and Tony argue about who's going to stop Ghost. They begin to bicker back and forth that Spider-Man's better than Iron Man, but no, Iron Man's better than Spider-Man. And Ghost begins to ask, are you guys being for real right now? Mary Jane and Harry run over to Augustus and they help him up, but Augustus tells them, I will be fine. Harry then tells him it's the least that they can do. Someone saved him and his family a few nights ago, so he's just paying it forward. Peter and Tony, as Iron Man and Spider-Man, continue to argue over who should take down Ghost, and that's when Peter mentions that Parker Industries is way bigger than Stark Industries, and Ghost kind of agrees. So he'll blast Spider-Man. Ghost begins to escape and Tony gives chase, but Tony's attack doesn't seem to be doing anything to Ghost. That's when Peter returns to the fight, and it's the same thing. His attacks don't seem to be doing anything. Ghost states that he has seen their attacks before, and he prepared for this, even for Spider-Man's new move, because it was posted on YouTube. Peter and Tony follow Ghost, and Peter begins to ask if this is the part where we actually team up. And Tony tells him, yeah, we should do that. So Spider-Man shoots one of his web coils through Ghost. Tony then grabs a hold of it and begins to electrically charge it, causing it to vibrate. The shock goes through Ghost, and it begins to fry his defenses, and finally he falls to his knees. Spider-Man says, look up, we're at the Midtown Manhattan Library. It's where they did that scene in the Ghostbusters movie where they cross the streams. Kinda like we just did, Iron Man. Later in the cellar of the super prison for super beings, Betty Brant is interviewing Augustus about his prison. Augustus goes on to state that he's proud of the facility's perfect record for not having a single outbreak. And he also states that he wanted a place where these super beings could be controlled because no one should have to lose their family like he did. As the interview concludes, Augustus walks back into the back rooms of the prison and past rows of people in test tubes. And he soon puts on the Regent suit, telling Dr. Stillwell that they will be preparing for the next phase because the world would be safer if he had all of the world's superpowers. Later, Peter and the others in his office watch reports of a new superhero named Regent stopping the villain Orca. Peter tells Harry that it looks like he's man-crushing over this Regent guy, and then a voice tells Harry not to worry, she will save him. Betty Brant walks in and Peter tells her it's been so long since they last saw each other, but why is she here? Betty says that she's just here to grab lunch with Harry and catch up on things. Betty then asks Peter if he'd like to come, but Harry tells her nope, Peter is the big boss, busy with meeting spreadsheets and pie charts, and then whispers to Betty, what were you thinking? As they leave, Peter goes back to his office. All of his workers begin to ask him for approvals and for him to look over this and that, but Peter tells everyone actually he has to leave for his Big Brother program, which is sort of true. He actually needs to go check on Miles Morales, a younger individual with spider powers taking the name of Spider-Man. Peter heads over to the batting cages where Miles is at, watching him web the oncoming balls, yelling, pew pew pew! He then lands and he asks, what did I tell you about that, Miles? And Miles tells him, I know, it's thwip thwip thwip. But as Peter looks over, he asks what he's doing here. And Tony Stark is all suited up as Iron Man, stating, "But don't mind me, pretend I'm not even here if that's even possible." Miles says that he and Tony were just getting back from an Avengers meeting and Tony wanted to test out the new web shooters. Peter then asks, "What's wrong with the web shooters that I gave you?" And Tony tells him, "That guy Peter, good guy, but he has terrible design work." You see, Tony Stark, who is Iron Man, is unaware that Peter Parker is actually Spider-Man. Miles, realizing that Tony just insulted Peter Parker to Peter Parker, realizes that this is not going to be a good thing, and that's when Tony offers to help Spider-Man with his web shooters. Elsewhere, with Harry and Betty, the reason they didn't want Peter to come along was so that they could have lunch with Mary Jane and not have a scene. Every time Peter gets near Mary Jane, old feelings come up and things seem to happen. Betty begins to talk about how her interview with Augustus went, but when Harry looks at the paper, he notices the logo for the prison, and that's when he remembers something. The other night, when he and Mary Jane helped Augustus up from the attack from Ghost, he had the same logo on his clothes. And that's when all three of them realize that, yup, Augustus is totally Regent. Back at the batting cages, Tony continues to make fun of Peter Parker, and he tells Spider-Man that if he wants, he can come work for him. When things go crashing down for Parker, Miles then holds his face in his hands, and Peter turns and punches Tony right in the face. Tony asks him, "What's your problem?" And Peter tells him, "It's company loyalty." Miles tries to break up the fight, but the two of them continue knocking each other around and flying all over the place. Seeing all of this on social media, Augustus is watching and he tells Dr. Stillwell that now is the time to begin the next phase. Miles decides to let Peter and Tony work out their differences and he decides to leave, but as he swings away, he discovers that he's trapped in a red bubble. At that moment, the bubble pops and Miles comes crashing down into an alley. Miles then sees Regent in front of him and he tells him, "So not cool, you're a hero, right? So what are you doing?" And Augustus tells him, "I'm saving the world." Back over at the batting cages, while Spider-Man and Tony are still continuing to fight, they hear an explosion and they both call out to Miles. They rush over to where the explosion was and Peter finds a piece of Miles' chest piece ripped up on the ground. Over in the cellar, though, of the super prison, Miles is hooked up to one of the test tubes from earlier. And that's when Regent tells Dr. Stillwell that this is a big important step that they've taken today. And right now, he doesn't have the time. Augustus then heads back up to the top floor of the super prison where he sees Betty Brant and Betty tells him that she'll just cut to the chase. "Are you secretly Regent?" As time passed, one by one, Regent began taking down all of the Avengers and acquiring their powers, even that of Thor's. After returning to his super prison cellar with his latest Avenger, Thor, Dr. Stillwell tells him that he needs to be careful with that suit. She doesn't think that he or the suit can handle another fight as of now. Augustus begins to take off the Regent suit and he makes his way back to the upper levels of the prison and he tells Dr. Stillwell, "Do not worry. As of now, the suit will be given a rest. There are things that only Augustus Roman can handle, starting with my first meeting with Mr. Osborn." Over at the Avengers headquarters, Tony and Spider-Man continue looking for Miles and they're having no luck. Jarvis even comments that oddly he's heard nothing from the rest of the Avengers, not even a peep, when suddenly through the window Red Wing comes flying in. Tony realizes that it's not a good sign when Red Wing is alone, and when Spider-Man and Tony try to figure out what to do next, Spider-Man gets a notice on his webware. When he plays back the message, it's a pre-recorded message from Harry telling him that he's going to need help in the super prison cellar. Betty Brant went missing and he thinks Augustus had something to do with it. Mary Jane realizes why that is. She, Harry, and Betty all figured out that Augustus is actually Regent. Tony tells Spider-Man to web up and hang on, and then with Spider-Man clinging onto his suit, he flies out of the room. As he heads towards the cellar, Tony makes a comment about Regent's suit. The way that it's unfinished, it looks like he's trying to prove something. And that's when a voice can be heard stating that, yes he is. And that's that even heroes like them destroy cities with their power. Regent flies in, punching Spider-Man towards the ground, and as Tony heads down towards the ground, the fight with Regent begins. But there's something that he's seeing. Regent dodges everything like he has spider sense, and he stretches like he's Miss Marvel. Yeah, Regent definitely snatched up the Avengers. It's like he's using the super adaptoid's tech in an armor form. Regent begins fighting using all of the different abilities that he's been collecting until finally he knocks both Spider-Man and Tony into the ground. Mary Jane and Jarvis are watching, and Mary Jane asks if Tony has any of those spare suits like he did before. Have them fly in by remote control and all. And Jarvis says that he does, but only Tony can control them. It was a safety feature to prevent people like Ultron from controlling them. And that's when Mary Jane gets an idea. She begins searching through the boxes from the Avengers Tower until she finds it, the Iron Spider suit. Jarvis is worried, but she tells him it's okay. She once wore an earlier version of Tony's suit, and she had spider powers during that whole Spider Island mess thing. Augustus then takes Spider-Man and Tony and prepares them to be brought down with the others and put into a tube. But inside one of the tubes, Harry's tank begins to fill with a liquid and he tries to beat his way out. Without having any luck, he remembers that there's a new app on his webware that Clayton Rigg helped make from his tech when he was Clash. Harry pushes the button and then a loud shriek begins to ring out from the webware device and the glass begins to shatter. better. Harry picks himself back up and he tries to escape, and he calls into his webware for Spider-Man. Peter then begins to hear Harry through his webware, and he begins to wake back up. He tells Harry that he needs to stay strong and not to give up, and he won't either. Augustus looks back and he tells him that it doesn't matter at this point. Do you think that you can escape my construct? Peter tells him no, but he knew that he had spider sense, so he wanted to create a little distraction so that his spider sense would be thrown off. And that's when Mary Jane appears, knocking Regent in the Iron Spider suit so hard that he releases his grips on Peter and Tony. As Peter and Mary Jane begin to battle it out with Regent, Peter stops and he begins to ask her, "Are you getting a weird feeling?" And that's when Mary Jane cuts him off and continues the sentence. Like this has happened, and Regent ends the sentence stating, "Before, but something's different." Tony flies in and asks, "Did it have more explosive missiles? Maybe? No? Oh well, I tried." And he launches in multiple missiles at Regent, blowing them up all over him. Mary Jane tells Peter to go on and help Harry. Her and Tony will handle things up here. So Peter makes his way into the prison and he finds Harry struggling with some of the guards. After freeing him, he then goes in deeper, beating up more of the guards to rescue Miles. And then all three of them begin to break everyone else out of the test tubes. Back up on top, Augustus begins to lose each of his powers one by one as the superheroes are being freed. But before he can finish off Tony and Mary Jane, the ground begins to crack, and a second later, Augustus is surrounded by everyone that he has captured. With Augustus finally captured and locked away in his own prison, the lives of everyone begin to return back to normal. Peter figures that it's time that he spends more time with his family and not lose sight of things like them anymore, with work in the way. Peter invites Aunt May and her husband Jay and all of their friends to a coffee shop. Augustus lost his family and it consumed him. Peter didn't want that to happen to him. As everyone begins to have a good time, Peter makes his way through the group saying hi to everyone, and that's when he overhears Jay Jamison coughing. Everyone rushes over as Jay hits the ground, and Peter tells someone to call 911. And that brings us to the conclusion of the latest Spider-Man storyline. There is a .1 series that pops up in the middle of all this. We're going to be doing that real soon called Amazing Grace. But if you want more Spider-Man stories, we have plenty on the channel. Go check them out in the playlist, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Spider-Man. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Comicstorian, and I'll see you guys next time right here.